I did not know my name for 11 days. I know that now, looking back. At the time, I only knew the forest. The way the light came down through the Vetharan canopy in long gold columns in the morning, the smell of wet stone along the ridgeline, the sound a person makes when they are trying not to be heard moving through old-growth brush. I knew how to move. I knew how to be still. My hands knew the weight of a weapon, even when my hands held nothing. My body remembered what my mind had swallowed whole. I was not afraid. That surprised me later, when I understood what I had lost. I should have been afraid. I was alone in a contested forest with no water, no name, no rank, no line. Only reflexes and a kind of gray silence, where everything else should have been. But fear requires a self to be afraid for, and I had been reduced, very precisely, to something that moved and breathed and watched. Dale Orvath found me on the third morning after whatever had been done to me, which I could not recall then and can only partially recall now. He was sitting beside a cold fire ring in the ruins of a coalition supply depot, eating something from a sealed pack, when I came out of the tree line. He looked up. He did not shout. He did not reach for anything. He said, "You're upwind. I've had you tracked since the ridge." I stopped. I watched him. His hands stayed on the pack. "I'm not a threat," he said. "I'm Dale Orvath. Survey crew. Coalition regional contract. The rest of the crew evac 2 days ago. I stayed because..." He paused. He looked at me with a directness I did not understand yet. Because I wasn't going to leave someone in the reach alone. I said nothing. I was cataloging him the way I catalog everything. Build, age, likely capability, intention. He was lean and weathered, mid-40s, with the particular stillness of a man who has spent years in places where stillness matters. Dark hair, more gray in it than not. A jaw with several days of growth, and a scar along the left cheekbone that had come from something bladed at an angle. His attire was practical, survey work vest, thermal underlayer, worn boots that knew this kind of ground. He was not looking at me the way the others had looked at me in those last moments before the gray came down. He was looking at me the way you look at something you intend to treat carefully. "Do you need water?" he said. I said yes. That was the first word I said to him. I remember this because for a long time, it was one of the only facts I owned. He gave me water and a sealed pack, and did not ask me anything for the first hour. We sat in the depot ruins while the morning fog burned off, and the forest came up into its full green-gold noise. Then he said, "Can I ask your name?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came. Not silence. Something worse than silence. A pulling sensation, the way a wound pulls when you try to move a joint that has been damaged. There was something behind that question, something that should have been there and was not. I pressed at it. The gray came up. "I don't know," I said. He nodded, as though this was not unexpected. He looked down at the pack in his hands for a moment. Then he said, "I found something. In the forest, 2 days ago, before I knew you were here. I should show you." He reached into the side pocket of his pack and took out a piece of material, dark, segmented, part of a pauldron lining, the inner surface. It had been cut free, carefully, from the shoulder plate it had belonged to. On the inner face, scratched into the material with something small and deliberate, was writing. Old Form Kethavan. I knew it was Old Form Kethavan the way I knew the weight of a weapon. My body knew, even though I could not have explained why. 3 words, the largest of which was a proper name. I looked at it for a long time. Something moved in the gray, far down, like a shape in deep water. "Do you know what it says?" he asked. "Yes," I said. I did not understand how I knew, but I did. It says, "Daughter of the Line." The last word is a name. "Can you read it?" I read it. The name came out of my mouth like something I had said 10,000 times and could not hear myself saying now. It sat in the forest air between us. Dale Orvath looked at me with that same careful directness. "Is that your name?" he said. The pull came again. The gray moved. "I don't know," I said. "All right," he said. "That's all right." He folded the piece of pauldron lining and offered it back to me. "Keep it." I took it. I have it still. That night, when the reach went dark and cold and the fire was low, he said my name. Not a question, just the name, spoken into the dark, the way you say a word you want to keep in your memory. I did not answer, but I did not tell him to stop. The second day we moved because we had to. There were sounds in the northern run of the forest that were not wildlife. The particular silence that precedes a coordinated human-shaped movement through brush. The way the birds in the mid-canopy went still along a corridor rather than a point source. Not a single disturbance point, which would be an animal, but a line of them, extending east, then curving. A sweep pattern. My body read it before I had words for what I was reading, and the words came a moment later, filed and clinical, with the particular cadence of tactical training that has been done so many times it lives in the spine rather than the mind. I told Dale, keeping my voice flat and low, and he listened without arguing. He did not question my interpretation. He did not ask me to explain the logic. He looked north through the trees for a moment, with the same careful attention he gave everything, then nodded once and began to repack his kit. We moved south, toward the river before first light, in the gray pre-dawn hour, when the forest is coldest and quietest, and the most honest about itself. "Who's following?" he asked, when we had put a kilometer between ourselves and the depot. "I don't know," I said. This was becoming my answer to everything. He never looked impatient when I said it. This struck me, over those first 2 days, more than I would have expected. I was offering him nothing. No name, no context, no explanation for why 6 people with coordinated movement patterns might be sweeping a forest for one unarmed woman. He had no reason to trust my tactical readings. He had no reason to stay. He was a civilian contractor with an intact evac option and a comm unit that worked, and a crew waiting at a pickup point somewhere south of the reach. He could have been out of the forest in a day. He stayed. He asked practical questions and accepted incomplete answers and moved when I said move. "Are they following you or me?" "Me," I said. There was no uncertainty in this. It was the same knowledge the body carries, the kind that does not require explanation. "Okay," he said. He did not ask why. He asked, "Are you armed?" "No." He unclipped a secondary blade from his pack harness and passed it to me, handle first. I took it. My hand closed on it with a familiarity that was almost violent. The precise grip, the angle of the wrist, the forward weight. My arm remembered what my mind did not. "You've trained with blades," he said. "Yes." "Extensively." "Yes." He said nothing more about it. We moved. The veteran reach is old. Older than the current border disputes. Older than the coalition survey contracts. Older than most of the claims that have been made on it. The trees are the dark-barked kind that grow slowly and do not die easily, and their roots have broken every stone path that was ever laid through them, and now the roots are the path. The understory is dense but navigable if you know the patterns, and I found that I did. My feet knew which root would hold, which ground would give, which shadow hid a gap. I knew this forest the way I knew old form Kethavan and blade grip, with a knowledge that lived below the gray wall. Dale kept up without effort. He was quiet in a way that was not practiced but native, the silence of someone who has simply spent enough time alone in open country that quiet has become his resting state. He did not narrate, did not fill the space between us with reassurance. He watched the same things I watched. When I stopped, he stopped. When I moved, he moved a beat behind, close enough to be present, far enough not to crowd. On the evening of the second day we rested at a collapsed stone structure. Old Kethavan survey post, I thought, though I could not have said how I knew the architectural style. The stonework was carved along the lintel with a pattern I recognized, again in the body rather than the mind. I stood in front of it for a long time with my hand pressed flat against one of the carved lines. Dale sat on a root nearby and watched me. "Does it mean something to you?" he asked. "The lintel carving," I said. "It's a border warden mark. It means this post was established by the 4th Kethavan territorial expansion. The expansion ran." I stopped. "I know when it ran." "When?" I told him. The dates came out of me cleanly, like recitation, the kind that has been repeated until it is part of the structure of your mind, rather than a thing you remember. He listened. His expression did not change, but his eyes were careful. "That's detailed knowledge," he said. "Yes," I said. "I don't know why I have it." He said after a moment, "You know, there's a theory. I'm not a medical expert, but I've read enough coalition field reports to have some familiarity. that suppression protocols work by interfering with self-referential memory. You don't lose factual knowledge, procedural knowledge. You lose the thread back to yourself. You lose the part that says, I. I turned and looked at him. Suppression protocol. That's what it looks like to me, he said quietly. Not injury, not natural amnesia. The pattern is too specific. You know how to move, you know how to fight, you know history and language and navigation. You just don't know who those things belong to. The gray moved. Something beneath it moved with it. They did this to me, I said. It was not a question. That's my guess, he said. Someone cut that pauldron lining out and left it. Someone wanted to preserve something, even if they couldn't prevent the rest. I looked down at the piece of material in my hand, the name carved into it. Why are you still here? I said. You said your crew evac'd. You could evac. He was quiet for a moment. The reach made its nighttime sounds around us, the long, low calls of something large moving in the canopy, the creak of the dark bark trees. I told you, he said, I wasn't going to leave someone alone in this forest. You don't know who I am. No, he said, but I know what you are, and I know what the forest does to a person alone in it with nothing. I did not answer. He fed the fire another piece of deadfall, and we sat in the warmth of it while the dark came down around us. That night, he said the name again. Quiet. Into the fire. Not to me. To the air. The same way you say something you are trying to hold on to. The gray did not crack, but something on the far side of it shifted, and I felt the shift. On the third day, the hunters found us. They came from the north and the east simultaneously, which told me they had a coordinator with high ground sight lines, the ridge probably, or a drone I hadn't detected. There were 6 of them, in field kit that was Kethavan in origin but unmarked, stripped of insignia, reclamation faction kit, the body knew, without being able to explain the name, the faction that had done whatever had been done. Dale and I were at the river crossing when they closed in. The Vetharan River at this point was 40 meters across and fast, waist deep at the ford. Behind us was the river, in front of us was the forest, and 6 people in it who had not yet showed themselves but were there, in the shadows at the tree line, audible to anyone who knew how to listen. Dale stood at my left shoulder. He had not drawn anything. He had both hands loose at his sides, weight slightly forward, the stance of someone who is not going to run, but is also not going to initiate. They're on you, he said, very low. Not me. Yes. Do you want to run? I thought about it. No, I said. They'd take me in the river. The crossing is controlled. Then we hold here. He said it simply, as a statement of fact. He was not asking, he was not calculating odds. He was simply noting that holding was what we were going to do. I looked at the tree line. The 6 figures had stilled. They were waiting for something. For me to run, perhaps, or for their coordinator to give an order. There was a particular quality to their waiting, not the patience of certainty, the patience of people who are not sure what they are dealing with. Something in the gray began to fracture. Not slowly. There had been 3 days of slow pressure, his voice saying the name in the dark, the pauldron lining in my hand, the architectural dates coming out of my mouth unbidden, the border warden mark under my palm. And now the fracture was running fast and clean, the way ice breaks after you've walked on it for too long. The suppression protocol, I would learn later from the coalition medical team, had been designed for temporary use, for transit, for transport, for moving a person through checkpoints without the person's identity creating complications. It was not designed to hold against 3 days of sustained, unhurried repetition. It was not designed for someone who kept saying the name in the dark without urgency or demand, as though the name were simply a thing that deserved to be spoken aloud. The name. Not a word on a piece of material, not a sound someone else was making. Mine. Given to me at the river right by my mother's hands, witnessed by the border warden of the 4th station, entered in the line record at the Kethavan seat. Given again at the rank ceremony, spoken aloud by the court elder, repeated by the assembled line, until it became the sound of recognition itself. Spoken on the day I took the warrior's commission by the old general whose name I could now also remember, who had looked at me with the particular attention of someone filing away what a person is made of. Spoken the last time by my mother, in the corridor outside the negotiation chamber, before I went in, 3 words in the old form that meant, I know who you are, and I am watching. My name, I said it aloud. Not to the hunters, to the river, to the forest, to the long gold light coming through the canopy at the angle that meant late morning, the same angle I had looked up at through these trees as a child. I said it in the old form first, the way it had been given, and then in the common tongue, and then in old form Kethavan again, which is the language in which names mean precisely what they say. The gray did not lift, it fell apart. The difference matters. I remembered everything, not all at once. The way a suppression protocol breaks is not a flood, but a sudden absence of the wall, and what is behind the wall is simply there. The way your hand is there when you open your eyes in the dark, always present, not retrieved. My name, my line, my rank, my mother's face, the river right, the border warden, old Sorev Kath, who had witnessed my naming, who I had not seen in 9 years, who held the 4th station, which was 3 kilometers upriver from where I was standing. The hunters had not moved. From the forest behind them, moving without hurry through the tree line on the south side of the ford, came a single figure in old-style border warden kit, carrying the plain staff that marked the 4th station. She stopped at the edge of the tree line and looked at me across the 30 meters of bank. Her face was older than I remembered. Her expression was the particular expression of a person who has waited a long time for something and is now watching it arrive. She said my name, my full name, with the line designation and the river right suffix, not a question, a confirmation. The hunters looked at each other. The one closest to the tree line took a step back. There is a thing in the old law of the Kethavan territorial line, older than the border disputes, older than the coalition survey contracts, nearly as old as the dark bark trees, that a name spoken at the river by a border warden in the presence of 2 witnesses constitutes a recognition of line. It cannot be administratively reversed, it cannot be suppressed, because it is not stored anywhere except in the memory of those who were present. The reclamation faction knew this. They had spent considerable effort ensuring that no such speaking would occur. Old Sorev Kathy had been waiting at the 4th station for 9 days. She spoke the full recognition, name, line, title, river right confirmation, in the old form, which is long and formal and beautiful, and the forest was quiet enough that every word carried. The hunters stood where they were, and the recognition settled over them like weather, and there was nothing to be done with it. The old law does not require an authority to enforce it. It is simply true, once spoken, in the way that a fact is simply true. When she finished, the hunters withdrew. They did not flee. They simply stopped having a purpose there and walked away through the trees, and the forest let them go. Sorev Kath walked to the ford and crossed it and came to us on the south bank. She looked at me for a long moment with those old careful eyes. "Line daughter," she said quietly. "Warden," I said. My voice was steady. I did not know how it was steady. Everything I had been before was present in me again, the whole weight of it, and I was standing in a forest in survey crew clothes with no armor and a borrowed blade and 9 days of nothing behind me, and my voice was steady. She looked at Dale. "You kept her name," she said. "I found it written down," he said. "I kept saying it." She looked at him for another moment, with the same careful eyes. Then she gave a single nod, that was not a small thing, in the Kethavan way of reading nods. "That was correctly done," she said. We stood at the river for a while. The water moved past us, cold and fast, making the sound that moving water makes in old forests, a continuous sound that does not vary, and does not stop, and does not mean anything except itself, which is enough. I was thinking about 9 days and the shape of them. The way the gray had been total, at first, not darkness exactly, but the absence of the thread back to myself, the way Dale had described it, the way it had felt like being reduced to pure function, pure motion, pure present tense, and then the thread coming back. Not because I had worked to recover it, not because I had pushed against the gray with intent, because someone had kept saying my name in the dark, steady and unhurried, as though it were simply a fact he was maintaining on my behalf, until I could hold it again. I looked at him. He was watching the river. He had that quality of stillness again, the kind that does not require activity to be present, the kind that simply exists as the person's default state. He had not said anything since Sorev Kathy's acknowledgement. He did not seem to need to. "You could have left," I said. "We covered this," he said. "I'm covering it again." He turned and looked at me. The river was loud enough that we could speak at nearly full voice, and the warden, 10 meters up the bank, would not hear the specific words. "You know what you are now," he said. It was not a question. "Yes. That changes things," he said. "For you. What you have to do, where you have to go. I'm aware of that." "Yes," I said again. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "I want to be clear about that. Whatever it changes, wherever it leads, I'm not going anywhere." I looked at him for a moment. He was not saying this with any particular urgency. He was saying it the way he had said everything over the last 9 days, as a quiet, unembellished fact, offered without expectation, simply true. "You kept my name," I said. "You would have gotten there," he said. "The name was yours. It was always there. I was just saying it out loud until you could." The river went on. The forest went on. Old Sorev Kath sat on a root up the bank and waited, without impatience, the way people wait who have already waited a long time and understand what waiting is for. I am not a person who uses words loosely. My line does not have that tradition. When we speak a thing at the river, in the old form, with the warden present, we mean it permanently, and it is entered in the record, and that is the end of the matter. I said his name, Dale Orvath. In the old form, it is a simple sentence. It means the one who stayed. He heard what I meant. I know he heard it, because of the way he went still. Not the habitual stillness of a man in an open landscape, but the particular stillness of a person who has been given something they did not expect and are receiving it carefully. "That's a Kethavan thing you just did," he said. "I don't know what it means exactly." "It means exactly what it sounds like," I said. He considered this. The river ran between its banks. A bird called somewhere in the high canopy, one long descending note. "All right," he said. He said it with the weight of someone who intends to be accountable for it. I turned and walked up the bank to where Sorev Kath was waiting. There was a great deal to do: the reclamation of formal record, the courier to the Kethavan seat, the accounting for 9 days, the legal process of restoration that would take weeks and follow channels I knew intimately. All of it waited with the patience of things that will certainly happen. Dale walked behind me and to my left, not deferential, present, at the distance that a person holds when they are neither hanging back nor pressing forward, but are simply there, consistently, regardless of what the terrain requires. Sorev Kathy rose from her root and looked at us both, and tucked her warden's staff under one arm. "There is a station shelter 3 kilometers up," she said. "It has a fire and a comm unit, and enough rations for several days." "Good," I said. We walked into the forest. The canopy closed over us in its dark bark silence, and the river faded behind us, and the old paths that I had known since childhood came back to me one after another, steady and present, the way everything came back, not retrieved, simply there. My name. My name, said in the dark over a low fire by a man who had found it written inside a piece of armor in a contested forest, and had decided, without drama and without asking for anything in return, to keep saying it until the person it belonged to came back. There is no recognition I can speak that is adequate to that. The old form does not have a sufficient construction. The closest it gets is the river right phrase, the one who stayed. But even that is only the surface of what I mean when I say it. What I mean is this: for 11 days I was nothing but function and motion, and a gray wall where my name should have been. And on the other side of that wall, every night, his voice was saying the name back to me across the fire. He did not know if it would work. He did not know if I was the person the name belonged to. He had a piece of pauldron lining, and a woman who moved like a warrior, and a guess, and he stayed with it. That is the human thing. I have been asked, since, by members of my own line who cannot quite place it, what it was, exactly, what he did, that constitutes a thing worth speaking at the river in the old form. They mean well. They are trying to understand the arithmetic of it. I tell them, he kept my name when I could not. When I had nothing and was nothing, and the gray had taken everything I was. He had the name. He said it out loud, in the dark, in a forest where no one was listening, night after night, simply because he thought it might matter. It mattered. He is at the station now, 3 kilometers up the river, doing what he does in any place he stays, learning the ground, watching the light, being still in the way that is native to him. He will be there when I return from the seat city, and when I return again from the second journey, and from the third. He said he was not going anywhere. He is not the kind of man who says a thing he does not mean. I am not the kind of person who speaks a name at the river and then forgets the weight of it. We are, each of us, understood correctly by the other. That is the whole of it. That is enough.